Okay, so we wanted to make a video to help you make the right decisions for when the time actually comes to sell your car. And whilst the title of this video does refer to supercars, what we're going to discuss is actually relevant to all luxury, performance and even classic cars too. So look, obviously the most enjoyable part of the buying process is choosing what car to buy next, choosing the right spec, going to collect it, the first drive, all that fun stuff. But what's also incredibly important, and what doesn't get discussed anywhere near as much, is actually selling the car you've got. Some people find it a little bit more uncomfortable knowing when to sell it, how to sell it, who to sell it to, making sure you get the right money and making sure you get the money safely. These are all important things to consider to give you that complete peace of mind. So we're going to split this video into a few different parts, and in this first video we're going to discuss when is the right time to sell your supercar. So when is the right time to sell your supercar? So of course you might not have a choice if you've ordered a brand new car and it's arrived at the dealer, just come across your perfect car you've always wanted and you need to sell your current car to fund that purchase. Of course you're going to have to let it go more or less straight away. You might have also had a sudden change of circumstance, whether that's a baby on the way and you've got to ditch the two-seater, or properties come up for sale that you want to buy and you need to free up some cash. There are many things that might just force your hand, but if you can plan ahead a bit more and you don't have the pressure to sell straight away, you can try and pick the most opportune time to sell. Now there are a few factors that will really determine this. There's obviously the type of car it is, the time of year, and also the general market conditions for that car. Firstly, we have to bear in mind the car industry is a very seasonal business, especially here in the UK where we have cold and icy winters, hot summers sometimes. So naturally demand does increase for SUVs, four-wheel drive performance cars in the autumn and winter, and demand for supercars, convertibles, sports cars increases in the spring and the summer. So one rule of thumb is to sell your supercar or your convertible in the spring so that any prospective buyers have the spring and the summer to use it, and sell your four-wheel drive, your SUV in the autumn. It's a fairly simple idea which does make some sense, and it does actually sometimes work out best this way. It's very likely there's going to be more buyers out there for your car if you pick the suitable season, and you'll probably find it a bit easier to sell. You know, there's more impulsive buyers out there who will buy a car and want to drive it and enjoy it straight away. So if you're trying to sell a track car in January, you're going to be unlikely to find one of those impulsive buyers. But does it mean you'll get a better price just by selling it in the right season? Not necessarily. For example, if you buy a car like this, if you're trying to sell it in November and it's worth say £250,000, some people might think it's not a good time to sell, I'll wait till the spring. But if that car depreciates over the winter, which is very possible, and even if values start to firm up in the spring, you probably will be worse off in the spring than had you just sold your car at the beginning of winter. On the other hand, if you're selling your car in the off season, you know, some dealers are going to be pretty cautious about buying it, especially franchise dealers, big dealer groups. They tend to have a stocking policy, 60, 90 days, the cars have got to go. So buying a convertible going into winter is going to be a bit more risky. They might be forced into selling it for a knockdown price, make a loss. So just be careful who you offer the car to. Obviously avoid taking any lowball offers. But look, here at Romans, we actually take the view that as long as the cars are the right article, the right spec, the conditions right and the history is right, we're very happy buying convertibles in December, SUVs in the spring. We don't devalue the cars based on the season, as long as it is what we call an exceptional example. You also have to think many of today's cars are very capable of being used all year round anyway. Especially when you think of hypercars, collectible cars, people generally take a longer term view anyway, so you know they're probably not going to be driven much, if at all, so that becomes less of a factor. But when it comes to the sort of rarer limited edition cars, classic cars, or anyone that bought a car with a sort of closer eye on its future value, and choosing the most optimum time to sell is going to be much more closely affiliated with the overall market conditions, more so than anything else. And that's speaking generally and specifically for your car as well. Unfortunately, no one has a crystal ball. The market can be very unpredictable, especially in today's world. We never really know what's around the corner. So, you know, over the last 7 or 8 years, we've seen serious fluctuations of demand and supply. Values have gone up and down. You know, it's very hard to buy at the bottom, sell at the peak. Sometimes it's just down to luck. but it does help if you can understand what's happening in the market. So I'd certainly advise any car owner to keep track of the market for your model, especially around at the time of the selling. Get a feel for what's selling, what's not, what direction the price is moving in. Is this car a future classic, or is there something else that's about to replace it? You know, it's worth considering what's the general state of the economy. Is the consumer confidence high? I sometimes see correlations with the property market. When that's hot, sometimes supercars are hot. And of course, you want to sell when the market is hot. So the best place to sort of track the market in the UK is probably Auto Trader. You know, their app's probably worth downloading. Not everything gets advertised on there, always worth looking at piston heads, or if you have something a bit quirkier, you might want to check out websites like Classic Driver, Car and Classic, or there's mobile.de as well. If you've got a left-hand drive car, it's worth checking out European prices, but just bear in mind, especially now with Brexit, the implications of tax importing and exporting, so they don't always correlate that well. But generally, if you're starting to see more and more cars come on the market like yours and they're not selling, prices are probably going to start dropping. Likewise, if you see cars firming up and there are fewer cars on the market, prices might start to inch upwards. And I guess there's two schools of thought here. You might want to get it on the market where there's not many around. You might get a strong price for it, especially if there's not one in your spec and your color. But you might think this is a trend that prices are moving upwards, so hold on to it, wait till prices have risen further. Other factors to consider when weighing up when to sell your car is to know how many were built compared to how many are in the market. Are they still in production, or has production ended? You know, if there's 1,000 cars built and there's only 5 on the market, that's a good indication the market for that model is strong. But if there were only 30 built and 10 of them are on the market, you know, that's a weak signal. Those cars are probably going to depreciate. Certainly with a short-term view, you might want to look at getting rid of it before prices start to drop. Always worth keeping an eye on what cars are coming out in the future. Is there a facelift coming? Is that model being replaced altogether? How might that affect the value? Sometimes people's first thought when they hear a model's being replaced is to sell it as quickly as possible. And sometimes that's wise, but it doesn't always work out like that. Quite often when a model comes out, people don't actually realize how hard they are to get hold of, how much they are. And what often happens is when the new model comes out, they're very hard to get hold of and actually drags the prices of the older ones up. So it actually pays dividends to just hold on to the car. One final thing is I would say when following the market is don't get too caught up in it. If you put too much emphasis on individual cars, you could get a little bit out of touch. You know, there's always people out there putting cars up for stupid prices. Some cars that are advertised don't even exist. And just because you know one car sold for strong money, it doesn't suddenly mean everything is worth more. Always remember, it only takes one person to fall in love with a car on a particular day. Specifications can vary so much, histories can vary so much, condition can massively vary. That's the hardest thing to actually get across in photos. Until you see a car in the flesh, you'll never quite grasp how good or bad the condition is. But look, many people just don't have the time or just don't want to track the market in this way, which I totally get. Can take some of the enjoyment out of driving a car if you're too worried about its value. But I would say it can pay just to be in the right circles, whether that's family, friends, car owner clubs, or just keep in touch with your favorite dealership. You know, deal with people you trust. If you do that, you should get a pretty good idea of what the market's like at the moment, whether it's a good time to sell or not. Hindsight is a wonderful thing in these situations, telling yourself if you'd only hung on to that car for a few more years, look at its value now, or vice versa. If I just sold it when I had that offer, now I've lost another 20 grand. So look, timing is very important when it comes to minimizing your losses, maximizing any gains. And that is something, you know, here at Romans, we're happy to give advice on. Besides, you know, we're very strong buyers. So if you have something special to sell, make sure your first call is to Romans International. Okay, so that's the end of the first part of this little mini series we're doing on selling your supercar. The next part will be about how to sell your supercar and the different options out there that you have. So make sure you stay subscribed, click that notifications bell to be the first to hear about the next part.